Okay, so today we're going to talk about desalinization and membrane distillation and some of the differences. So basically, water shortage is a large and growing problem in the world. We only have a limited amount of water, obviously, in the world, and a source of fresh water is becoming a real problem here, all over the world, especially in developing countries. And obviously, one of the best ways that we have found to remedy this problem is through desalinization efforts throughout the world in these remote countries. Today I'm going to be talking about membrane distillation and why that is going to be one of the more researched and one of the newer techniques that is going to be used while desalinization efforts are taking place all over the world. So like I said, water shortage, it's one of the biggest problems across the world, and then I'll be able to tell you a little bit about the different techniques that are already in place for desalinization, and then how membrane distillation is going, how I think it could be the best solution to this problem. So 1.2 billion people live in areas where water is physically scarce, so that means they physically are unable to run into a fresh water supply at all times. So they will have access to salt water and other stuff, but fresh water is not readily available for them to just drink. 780 million of those people do not have access to clean water, so this is not bacteria-free or gone through any of the purification stages that the drinking water we go through has been. And this is such a big problem because obviously those numbers are huge. That's almost a quarter of the world's population, but at the same time, that large number will result in a lot of deaths from these water-related diseases. I have here 3.4 million people basically dying each year just because of a lack of fresh water. So the lack of fresh water across the world in these developing countries is a big problem. So desalinization is viewed as probably the best remedy for this problem because it's cheap and energy efficient. So desalinization is basically a process that removes salt and other minerals from the water. There's a couple different types of ways that we can do this, and I'll talk a little bit about those. But doing this will produce fresh water that, like I've already spoke about, will allow for humans to drink this water, but also safely used for irrigation and their farming and stuff. And yeah, so it's a low energy technique that will basically not require a lot of power or materials to end up with fresh water at the end. That's perfect for the developing countries because, like I said, fresh water is not that big of a deal in developed countries because freshwater systems have already been in place for a long time, but in developing countries, there is still a lot of work that needs to be done in these remote areas. The two main different processes that we have right now are just basic distillation processes, so vacuum distillation, which is very expensive, obviously because a vacuum must be created, so that's just not an efficient choice for a remote location, and then a couple different distillation setups up here. And then the other type, which is what is being more researched heavily, is membrane processes. So that is basically boils down to reverse osmosis and membrane distillation. So membrane distillation is what is being, I researched more and what I think will become more popular throughout the years, just because it is a cheaper alternative to some of the other practices that are in place. So membrane distillation is a thermally driven separation process that basically allows for vapor molecules to leave a hot feed stream coming through on one side, transition through the pores in the main membrane because of the vapor pressure difference, and essentially condensate on the permeate side. So that whole process basically is what it would be for desalinization. Is you would just take your normal ground salt water and run it through that side, and run just normal groundwater over here on the other side, and the temperature difference between those two will allow for the salt to travel through the membrane, condensate over here, and leave us with only a clean water solution. And because of that, like I said, only on the permeate side, it only requires groundwater, so that is one of the one of the best reasons why it's so cheap and low energy. So membrane distillation versus reverse osmosis. So reverse osmosis is the only other membrane process that is really truly in effect right now. It's the most popular one as of right now. It is similar to membrane distillation, but membrane distillation is better for a couple different reasons. It has 100% theoretical rejection of ions and macromolecules. So obviously 100% rejection of these molecules will allow for us to have ultra pure water and for irrigation and human consumption. One of the benefits of reverse osmosis is that it allows for the formation of polarization films. Sorry, that's not a benefit. But so when these polarization films form on the membrane within the process, the buildup over time, because these don't get cleaned often and regularly, it's too hard to do that, will often create bacteria which will then foul the water and completely negate the process that we're running. So it is obviously contradictory to what you're trying to do. But that's one of the problems that has been found with reverse osmosis in developing fields. But they are both very popular because both are low energy, low cost solutions for desalinization. So they're both versatile enough that we can put them in developing countries and remote locations and still be able to feasibly and on the economic side run this technique. So, basically, the world, we won't stop having a water problem. Water shortage it's not talked about a lot just because in developed countries it is just a standard of life. We're used to having water throughout our lives. We grew up like that. But in developing countries, and we've all heard about it, but the numbers that I presented earlier in the presentation show that it is a huge problem, and I mean, having over 5 million people basically a year die because of waterborne diseases is a very high number when it's a very cheap, there are cheap and energy efficient ways to get clean water. So we've talked about it, and desalinization is probably going to be the best solution to this water shortage problem over the years. There's going to be a bunch of new techniques that will be developed. Like I spoke about earlier, membrane distillation is what I think is going to be one of the best processes. It's low energy, we can put it in any country where we need to, and yeah.